Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we believe mental illness can be temporary and transformative. Stay tuned for innovative, effective tools from experts in the field of mental health. Hosted by Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist. This podcast aims to change the narrative around mental illness. Move from a place of fear to a place of hope and solutions. Here on Your Mind.
Beatrice Birch is the founder, ED, and director of the Therapeutic Program of the Inner Fire Proactive Healing Community in Vermont. She has worked as a Huska artistic therapist for more than 30 years in integrative clinics and in inspiring initiatives in England, Holland, and the United States, where the whole human being of body, soul, and spirit was recognized and embraced in the healing process. Well, Beatrice, good morning. It's delightful to see you again.
It's very nice to see you, Timothy. It's been a few years.
It has indeed. We did an interview on April 7th of 2020, and we did one on March 1st of 2022. So it's been too long. I'm looking forward to getting caught up. I'm hoping you could start us off by letting people know a little bit about how you got into the work you do and what drives your passion for it.
I'd be glad to, Timothy. I'm still sort of in awe of it myself because really, 15 years ago, I had no idea I would be doing this. But I was working at another rehab in the United States. And at one point, a number of individuals, and I working as a Hauschka artistic therapist, which is all about really connecting the individual with their divine creative self, which is within each one of us. And a number of individuals approached me one time, unbeknownst to each other, but I thought it was a kind of a setup, like what's going on here? Because they all came into the artistic therapy space, said the same thing, made the same statement, and asked the same question, which doesn't typically happen. And the statement was, I hate being medicated. The question was, isn't there a choice? I had worked in Europe for 25 years where we had never medicated anybody, but we had used artistic therapies and diet and all this to help people through the challenges that they're having, including cancer and other more, what we think of more physical conditions. And I shared with them what I could, and then eventually they left. And then within 2 years of their departures, their varied departures, I learned that 6 of them had chosen suicide.
Oh, wow.
And when I heard the first person, I couldn't believe it. She was such a tender, sensitive, thoughtful human being. And then I heard of another one and another, and it was just sort of assumed or taken for granted, but I couldn't bear it. And I remember thinking, I'm out of this. I can't handle this. This is much too real and so wrong, because in Europe, we had never medicated anybody in the alternative practices I was with. But then I realized, no, innocence is bliss. I'm not innocent. They all, and I would say karmically, they all came to me. Why? They all made the statement and asked the same question. Why? So I realized it all sort of just was coming to me. I chose to take their suicides as a sacrifice and a wake-up call. And I realized we're only offering a choice. I need to find my colleagues, need to draw from the best of my life experiences. And we simply offer a choice. We're telling no one to come off their meds. But as an alternative to suicide, you bet. And I think you may be aware, or people may be aware who are watching this, that in 2023 in the United States, there were 50,000 suicides. And we've just completed 2024. I don't know what those rates are, but the suicide rate is going up. And I do believe there is a direct correlation with the zombifying effects of these psychotropic medications, the antipsychotics, the antidepressants, the benzodiazepines, and so on,
Especially in combination with the social isolation and, the various other factors that are in one way or another resulting in a depersonalization
Yeah.
for many of us.
Yes. Yeah. So Timothy, we've been going now. We're having our 10th birthday in September.
Wonderful.
And we always want to keep the numbers low. We're not interested in becoming a big organization, but rather maybe starting Inner Fires in other places. But we've supported close to 60 people to slowly, carefully come off their psychotropic meds and reclaim their lives. And that has been to live with them day in and day out for 10 years, witnessing every moment, all the challenges that they meet. And still, at night when I turn in, I am full of such awe for their courage, their tenacity, and really such joy, because it's a wonderful moment when an individual will say to me, Beatrice, I'm beginning to feel myself again.
Wonderful.
And it's like, yes, it's wonderful. It's great, but stay engaged in the program, because as many people know, the lower you get on your medication, the more difficult it is. And our theme song remains, stay engaged. Even when you don't feel like it, stay engaged. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing that you're willing to work with people that way. There are very few options for that. That's why we like to interview various functional medicine providers and other pioneers in the field who are waking up and recognizing that the current system of matching a medication with a symptom list is not effective for helping people live healthy lives.
Yeah. And often people come in, Timothy, so shuffling their feet, blurry-eyed, over 150 pounds overweight. And it wasn't so long ago that one of the seekers who had been haunted by intrusive thoughts and voices said to me, he had been here, the person had been with us for about 4 weeks or so, when he shared with me, since I came, even before tapering, I haven't been bothered by intrusive thoughts. And I thought, really? And what do you put that down to? And he just felt just being surrounded by respect, love, people. And I mean love, nothing sentimental about it. It's a true force, We believe in everybody as being a creator and not a victim. And the diet, of course, it's no sugar in the diet, gut friendly, all this. So the combination has been very, very important. But this happens that people just, oftentimes when you go into the hospital, you can feel so alone, and it's me against a whole hospital. And is anyone going to listen to me? And we're always encouraging people, claim your voice. Tell us you're not happy about something. You've had a hiccup with somebody or other. Let's talk about it. And also claim your feelings, and then choose what you want to do with them. Yeah. So, I mean, if this, I wanted to focus today, Timothy, really on just the seekers. And just to mention briefly, the term came from when I was I worked in prisons for many years and painted with men in a medium security. And one young man came to me one day, and we'd been painting together for about 1.5 years or so. And he said, I was trying to write to a friend on the outside about this art class, and it's so hard to describe what happens here. Eventually, I said to my friend, it's an art class, yeah, but it's really a spiritual class. And then he looked me straight in the eyes and he said, this is what I was looking for on the outside. Isn't it strange? I had to come to prison to find it. And I thought to myself, I looked at him, I thought, you're all seekers. You're looking for something more than this fast-paced, superficial, materialistic life. And so when I was thinking of what to call people at Inner Fire, I didn't want to call them clients, residents, patients, but I thought of him, of Ian. I thought we call them seekers. Yeah. And so I really wanted to be able to focus today on the seekers and the courage and the tenacity of the seekers. And I don't want to give the impression at all that it's easy. It's a beautiful place where we are. And to come off the medications is no joke because, first of all, the medications disconnect us from what I would call our three soul forces, which are we can think, we can feel, and we can do. And like any other substance, alcohol, crack, heroin, whatever, it all disconnects us from our higher self, from the part of us that allows us to make free decisions, right? And not just be controlled by our emotions or so. And so just the courage that they have, that they go through, and in the tapering process, one can tip into violence. We've had that rarely, but we have had it. And then to understand where this is coming from, as one of our seekers told me, when you come off something like lithium, which is like living under a wet blanket for years and years and years, suddenly the colors are brighter, the sounds are sharper. Suddenly all the feelings that have been suppressed by these medications are just unleashed, And so no wonder somebody can tip into anger or tip into all these emotions, which we work with, And I need to remind people that this is not you, but this is you trying to deal with the effects of the psychotropic meds that you're taking. And to separate them, shame is such a huge issue for so many people. And you have to realize that shame, it's not you, right? And it's remarkable what you're trying to deal with. I mean, we have people who arrive on 8 different medications. And so I remember one young man partway through his year with us, because typically it's a year, so we don't have to rush the tapering process, leaning forward in his chair and saying to me, "Are you telling me it's up to me?" And my inner voice, to be honest, said, "Well, yes, of course it is." But I was just left wondering, why would you imagine it's not up to you? And it's because people grow up being told the pill will do it. The
Right.
pill will solve your answers, your concerns.
Well, and even before that, they're told, you're sick, you're damaged, you're broken.
Yeah.
And this pill is the solution to it. This pill will fix you. And so there's so much about the system that's misaligned with recognizing we, as human beings, we've got a range of emotions, thoughts, emotional energies, other energies moving through us. And if we're never taught how to identify them, discern them, and work with them, we got a mess on our hands because we are not
exactly.
we are not simple single-celled creatures. We're complex social beings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Despite what the pharmaceutical and medical world want to think, But so there's certain things that I think people might find interesting, Timothy. And so if somebody is in their tapering process, tipping a little bit toward mania, now we work preventatively. Once someone has tipped into mania, it's very hard to get them back. But I discovered if you jump rope, so you have all this excess energy, right? You cannot jump rope unless you're in your body. So you're combining grounding someone with the activity that they're needing to do to channel. Or let's say chopping wood. It could be that someone's in their tapering process. It's very clear. The greatest support for them would be to chop wood. So every morning for an hour, and you can see the difference and they can feel the differences. I feel totally different. And it's because they realize I'm in my body. And the tapering process can lift me out of my body if I'm not careful. There was one time, I don't think I've mentioned this with you, but there was one time when a young man in our first year had been haunted by really horrific voices for years and years and years. And he came in one day and he said, "Beatrice, I've just been splitting wood for 2.5 hours. And it's the first time in years I haven't heard voices." And it's like, honey, you can't hear voices if you're splitting wood. Or you jolly well better not, you know? But for him, it was like, you mean I don't have to be a victim of voices all my life? And it's like, no, you don't, you know? And so this is just indications for people who are wrestling with this. They have to stay engaged. You need to establish a rhythm and an order and work your physical body. And, you know, one of the artistic therapy mediums that I use is play. And so it's, for an example, somebody who comes in on a lot of medication and is very well behaved because of being somewhat zombified. It can take them hours and hours and hours to make a sphere. And that's really frustrating because they can see, I can't even make a blooming sphere, you know, but of course you can't roll it. And then what's so interesting is as they begin to taper from their medications, they can make a sphere in no time at all. And that's always a good sign. Like there is your higher self. There's your center coming more into alignment. And for some people, when they're working, we work with the platonic solids, for instance. And there are some, particularly those who are more in the artistic realm of life, can find the exactitude of making a cube or an octahedron or so with their fingertips, bringing their energy right down into there, can be really frustrating. And it's very beautiful when someone who's beginning to feel again can actually say, this is frustrating. And it's like, it is. It is. It's awakening a whole nother part of you. It's awakening, you know, more critical thinking, more critical observation, you know. And so we're always working with trying to balance the soul, Timothy.
Well, yeah, the other part of that is if they start to experience frustration and they learn they can tolerate it. They don't have to run from it. They don't have to medicate out of it. They don't have to see it as a sign of being damaged and broken. Now they can establish a set of skills within themselves for using
That's
the
it.
energy of frustration as a feedback rather than
Yeah.
a label of my brokenness.
Yeah. And I think it's the diversity and the comprehensiveness of the program where there are always things that the individuals really like to do. And maybe there are a few things they don't like so much to do, but you still do it, you know? And, you know, when you least feel like staying engaged is when you should. And at the end of the day, when people say, you know, I'm tired, it's like, honey, you should be tired. You know, being tired for the right reasons, doing the right things, everything that's done here is therapeutic and real. You know, nothing is done just to be nice. But there's these moments where, you know, in the tapering process, people can, you know, I've heard individuals say, ever since I went on the medication, I have felt so lonely. I've disconnected from my friends. And it is isolating. It's very hard, very, very hard. And it was a beautiful moment when somebody said, a seeker said to me, you know, I'm no longer wishing there was a way that I could die. The person wasn't interested in suicide, but they just didn't really want to be alive.
Right.
And as they've tapered, as they said, I begin to feel light within me. I begin to feel movement coming from within and guiding me. And there's more life in my soul. Or the person expressed feelings of dignity and more alive. And, you know, I could feel anger in myself that people have to go through this. And there's a very, you know, is it really worth it? You know, it's not, in so many cases, it's not solving a problem, but again, we'll stay engaged because you're partway through. And already they begin to feel more life and more dynamic and they can laugh. And we also cry here, you know?
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I remember another seeker sharing, you know, asked, so what are you going to do when, said to one of our guides, one of our staff, what are you going to do when I get manic? And the guide put it in the person's hands and said, well, what are you going to do when you get manic? And then he responded, and then the guy could ask, and what do you want us to do when you get manic? And I'll never forget it. The response was, be real. Very simple, very profound. And think it through. If you're manic, you don't know what's real. So the seekers need to be surrounded by people who are not going to be afraid if they tip into this, but they're going to be real with them. And the seekers, they count on us because they can't always tell what's happening, to guide them, to let them know it's going too far, or something like this, or just to work with them in that way. Yeah.
And as you talked about, help them understand the energies they're feeling and redirect them, channel them in a way that's productive, that gets some of that energy released and maybe
Absolutely.
taps into a different area. So if I'm, flooded with intellectual energy, I'm spinning with obsessive negative thoughts. If I do something that's physical or something that's creative or something that's more emotionally based, it helps that balance get restored.
Absolutely. And what's very exciting, Timothy, is we're beginning to hire our graduates. We're beginning to hire people who were told, you'll never work again. The chemistry in your brain is wrong. You'll have to be on disability and medications the rest of your life. And it's a lie. It's just simply a lie. And it's not true. So, and that's very exciting because they know why the program works, so they can really help uphold the program and guide. And they're, of course, role models for others, But in our years, Timothy, in these 10 years, only 4 times have we had to take somebody to the hospital where there was tipping. There was one time when I suggested the individual go up a little bit on their medication. And I remember they turned to me and said, of all people, you're suggesting that? And I said, yes, because I want to keep you at inner fire. And what's happening, if it carries on, we'll have to take you to the hospital because we can't handle it. We're not a locked facility. And there's a limit to what we go a long ways. And I would guess probably much further than a lot of places would go, but there are limits, right? And so the person went up a tiny bit just to stabilize and then continue the tapering process. But there have been just these 4 times when people have had to go. And then I go into the hospital and the places are they're so inhumane. You can't get outside. The food is full of sugar, like being in solitary confinement. And of course, their meds get jacked up again. And it's like I speak to the doctor and say, they've worked so hard to get low. Please, just the minimal amount, but it doesn't make any difference, And then eventually they come back. And I think I mentioned this before. We're wanting to create a cocoon room here. We haven't yet, where an individual would be able to go if they feel unsafe. And of course, if you read the smaller print, Prozac and some of these other medications, the smaller print says danger to yourself or others, suicidal ideations. Why we would give people these medications beats me. And then we're surprised by their behavior and it just snowballs and more medications and all that. So, yeah, so that's what we're also aiming to do.
So it's wonderful to have options, right? So that there are people who that's all they want. They just want a medication. They want to get back to work and get back to their family. But when you have a situation, and we have so many where polypharmacy is more and more common these days. I know one gentleman that I interviewed was he called it polypharmacy only when they get 5 or more meds. And I said, poly means multiple, not necessarily 5. And so if you have somebody on several medications and they're still miserable or suicidal, like, the young woman, Brooke Seam, who was 30 years old, feeling suicidal, and she'd been on meds since she was 15 when they forced her into a hospital to take meds. that's a situation where the meds clearly aren't working. If you've been on them for years and you're still suicidal,
But,
a reasonable person would say, well, maybe the solution isn't more meds.
yeah, but Timothy, the problem is, and in our first year, I got a call from a doctor on the West Coast. Her main clientele are suicidal psychiatrists. They're stuck in the same system, right?
Yeah.
So, and our psychiatrists are not trained anymore unless you go to a special alternative type school or so. They don't take into account the diet, the inflammatory aspects of our diet, and all of this. And so they've got no tools. And that's why we also feel by offering a training, hopefully in May, just get people talking about it and sharing their experiences.
And in that case, you mean to train psychiatrists?
Yes. Yeah. Prescribers. So that because if they're questioning the system, they're good people, right? And for them to know you're not alone. And of course, everyone's afraid of the liability and all of this, but we need to do this because people are, I mean, imagine having your patients slowly become zombified and you can't even communicate with them or they take their lives. But you don't know about choice. You don't know there is something else that I can be doing. I can be suggesting, So that's what we're aiming to do now, to work with that aspect. The other thing I think to mention here is that the seekers, they all spend a year with no computer, no cell phone, no social media, not even canned music. So I remember in one day when a seeker had arrived and as we were washing up the dishes, she said, well, can we listen to music as we wash up? And it was like, well, do you sing? She said, yes. And she burst into a beautiful Joni Mitchell song or so, and we were all singing as we were doing the dishes. But she was also somebody who said to me, Beatrice, I can't avoid myself anymore. And it's like, that's pretty tricky. Really tricky. How do I work with aspects of myself that I've hidden away, But it is admirable, Timothy, what the courage people have and the tenacity people have. And I often think of it as they're rebirthing themselves. Their mother gave them their physical birth, and now they're really having to birth themselves, free themselves. And we can only, oftentimes, a parent will say to me, you saved my son's life, you've saved my daughter's life or my spouse's life. And it's like, actually, no, I haven't. They have saved their own life by staying engaged in this program, which works on all aspects of themselves. And in fact, I'm not interested in healing anybody, Timothy. I'm very interested in facilitating their own healing journey. And that's what, I've often thought you can become addicted to therapists, yard sales, cocaine. It's, addiction is addiction, and
Well, people have heard me say many times over the years, if you understood how many people I've shared the tools with or my approach to therapy who've left after the first session and thought I was crazy, then you'd really understand how when you get a change in your life, it's because you've picked up tools and applied them to yourself. It's not because I
yeah,
showed you the tools.
yeah. And it is very humbling work because, well, as you just said, and I've said this to the seekers, I can't make anyone do anything. Doesn't matter how deeply I believe in this or that. If they say no, we'll encourage them, but we can't make anybody. And, but it is when one comes to Inner Fire, you always come for a 3-day visit. So you really get a taste of what this year commitment is. And of course, if one comes and you're not on medication, which is fine, or if you've come off a benzo, but you're still reeling from the side effects of it, and we help people taper to a level that works for them, which could mean off. But if, we're not a locked facility, as I've said, and if you're determined, and all of our seekers who have reclaimed their lives and are back out in the world and Many of them are working some way in this realm to support others. They're also starting their own businesses. Some started their landscaping business, and there's a lot of unbridled creativity that comes with reclaiming their voice. And they all say you've got to stay engaged in the program. And there's no way you couldn't get better. That's a big thing to say, but it feels like that there's no way you couldn't get better if you stayed engaged in this program that works on all aspects of the human being, of body, soul, and spirit.
Well, and it's people who've studied this understand that before this proliferation of medications and overprescription, people who had an episode of depression or mania, most of them had a resolution, whether they got treatment or not, within 6 months or a year, and very few of them had recurrences.
Yeah, exactly.
Because something shifted. They used it as a wake-up call. If I'm in a daily grind at work and I'm depressed and I realize I'm not very good at my job, or I'm really good at it, but it,
Yeah.
doesn't nourish my soul. And so then I get depressed and I drop out. And when I come back, I start my own landscaping company, or I start a computer business, something that resonates with me. And then I don't get depressed again every year or 3 times a year.
And I think we also have to appreciate, now with the legalization of marijuana everywhere, and typically it's much stronger than what was used in the 50s, 60s, sort of 70s, and it's laced with this or that. You have young people having out-of-body experiences, and they can't get back in their body. And when you're not grounded, then you can imagine all sorts of things. You go up into your head and you're just there. And then people say it's mental health. No, they've had a bad experience with this, and you can pull them with the right support. You can pull them in to their body again if they'll engage, of course, Yeah.
Well, and it's a sense of community. I was interviewing Dr. Ross Ellenhorn, who does a community-based approach to trying to keep people engaged in work, engaged in school, engaged in their families, and bring them treatment in their living situation rather than putting them in hospitals or inpatient, outpatient intensive programs, etc. And he talks about how he is very well versed in the research that says social integration is part of the healing process. It's a curative factor in itself. So many of us are feeling isolated. We live in our little boxes at home. We work in a little cubicle at work. We stare at a screen. We have so many people who are not interacting with nature. They're not interacting with their own body. They're not interacting with other bodies. And so everything about what you're creating at Inner Fire integrates all these different things, recognizes the need for engagement of the person with themselves and of the people with other people.
That's right. And also for many people who come, we're in a beautiful location, no street lights. You can see the stars. You can hear the silence that rings. You're just in nature, and being a year program, it's the whole season. All the 5 seasons. We have mud season here in Vermont. But it's also, what's very beautiful is from the 6th month, then we begin to work with the parents and the individual, or the spouse and the individual, because when the loved one comes to Inner Fire, the family members are left with that. This is the memory I have of my beloved. But they don't realize how this individual grows and changes and evolves and claims their voice and deals with their feelings. And so there's a lot of what I call family work. It's work together, but it's beautiful. And I remember some parents at the end of one session said to their offspring, "Thank you for coming to Inner Fire." Because of all that could happen for the family. And then what happens is, but in the last 3 months, 10, 11, 12, month 10, 11, 12, that's when the individual goes out into the broader community. And some do volunteer services in soup kitchens or other places, or they work with a glass blower, or they do restorative justice work, or whatever they have perhaps never done, always wondered about doing. And it doesn't mean they're going to do that the rest of their life, but there they have a foot in the outside world and with us, That's really beautiful because they need to integrate. They need to see, yes, I can stand on my own,
And that the skills and the strength that they've experienced in themselves in inner fire translates out, generalizes to their life, wherever they go back to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So a term that I sort of coined years ago when I had my own private artistic therapy practice was healing is the process of tapping untapped wells within our innermost soul. There's always more to go and explore that. And I think that's definitely what happens for many individuals. They come with limited life experience, and this is a place I often say, practice it. Practice it, Yeah, it's remarkable. I feel honored, actually, Timothy.
Yep. Yeah, I think everybody who's connected to what they're doing and sees the truth of it feels honored.
Yeah, yeah. And also, time and again, to experience the resilience of the human spirit. And I say that the part of us, there's a part of us that has actually never been wounded. It's referred to sometimes as the witness or the higher self. I call it also the charioteer that guides my wild horses, But so that when somebody leaves, I can't promise their parents or their loved ones that they'll never have any challenges again, but they'll work with them in a very different way. And they'll inwardly know this challenge belongs to me, and if same challenge keeps coming back time and time again, I better look and see, why? Why am I calling this back again?
Yeah. What is it I haven't yet learned?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Guy Finley likes to say that the lesson will keep coming back until I realize I haven't learned the lesson.
Exactly. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I just looked at the time and realized we're running low on time. I just want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to let people know how you'd like to have them reach out to you if they've got questions or they've got interest. How do you want them to reach out to you?
Sure. You can contact me with my email, which is beatrice.innerfire@gmail.com. They're also our website, which is innerfire.us. And I'm very, very willing to spend time and support somebody, whether they come to Inner Fire or not. The most important is more that they get the support that they need and can. I mean, there's a limit as to how much time I can give, but definitely people must know there is a choice, and it's coming. It's coming. More and more people, thank goodness, are speaking up, and this is not the answer. The medications, in the long run.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful that people like you are doing what you're doing and growing in it. Congratulations on reaching the 10-year spot, and I'm very hopeful that you're going to be able to start doing training for people that are prescribers so they can understand a lot more options than just some list of symptoms, list of meds, these meds aren't working, so we'll just discontinue them and start another one. And that just, for many people, that's just a nightmare.
Yeah, it's true. And also, of course, we don't know it all. All right. But we have a lot of experience to share. And that's how we all grow together. And one thing I could mention, Timothy, is that we are a not-for-profit. We're licensed as a TCR. and we're wanting to complete the Inner Fire home. I've been asked to start Inner Fires in different places, but until we finish the Mother program here, I don't have the time to go elsewhere. But anyone who would be interested in helping us complete it so that we can then have people who want to start Inner Fires come and spend 3 months with us and live it. And then go on back and I'll come and support, or one of our guides will come and support in that sense. So
what does
and we get,
what does it mean to complete it? What's your image? What's your vision of what it would
well,
take to complete it?
well, if we had 2 million would be wonderful. And that would help us complete the heart of the home, which is where we'll be giving workshops. And we've also want to offer retreats for people who can't take a year out, but who want to come for a shorter period of time. And they can at least see the difference in the diet. But the heart of the home, which is where we'd also have this cocoon room and other workshop spaces and therapy spaces, and the West Wing, which will allow us to host 10 seekers in a way, and then an arts and drama barn. So we're looking for that. And yeah, it would be really wonderful at this time to have a place where people can come and really stay with us and learn what we do and how we do it, and then take it back to their communities. It's actually a very exciting time, Timothy. It is.
Excellent. Well, I thank you so much for being willing to share with our audience. And I look forward to hearing how prescribers are learning from you after you get your certification. And once again, congratulations on the 10 years. It's fabulous.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Timothy. Good. Thank you for everything you're doing too. Yeah.
Blessings. Beatrice Birch is the founder, ED, and director of the Therapeutic Program of the Inner Fire Proactive Healing Community in Vermont. She has worked as a Huska artistic therapist for more than 30 years in integrative clinics and in inspiring initiatives in England, Holland, and the United States, where the whole human being of body, soul, and spirit was recognized and embraced in the healing process. She has lectured and taught as far afield as Taiwan. Her passionate belief in both the creative spirit within everyone and the importance of choice, along with her love and interest in the human being, has taken her also into prisons where she has volunteered for many years, offering soul support through alternatives to violence work and watercolor painting. Please note that we have 2 previous interviews with Beatrice and discussions about the work at Inner Fire. One was dated April 7th, 2020, and the other is dated March 1st, 2022. If you want more information about Inner Fire and its origins and Beatrice's work there, please refer back to these interviews as well.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.